They laughed when the barren alien princess was sent to a human. The miracle stunned them. Zephyra, the youngest princess of the kingdom of Nor, stood at the edge of the palace balcony, looking down at the grand city below. The streets, once filled with life and laughter, now seemed empty and silent. The kingdom was in crisis, and Zephyra felt the weight of the royal family's failure on her shoulders. For centuries, the Nor had been a proud, powerful race, their dynasty stretching back beyond memory. But now their line was in danger of ending with her. She was barren. The royal bloodline, once filled with powerful rulers, had failed to produce an heir for generations. Her mother, the queen, had tried everything. Treatments, rituals, and even seeking help from neighboring star systems had been unsuccessful. Yet here Zephyra stood, a failure in the eyes of her people. Her heart ached as she thought of her parents. The king, once a strong and mighty leader, had grown quiet, his spirit broken. The queen, too, seemed lost in her grief, unable to console herself, let alone Zephyra. It was as though the whole kingdom had abandoned them all. In the council chambers, the royal advisors whispered behind her back, their words filled with judgment and condemnation. They had failed her, and now she had failed them. She had failed the kingdom. The doors of the chambers opened with a soft creak, and Zephyra turned to see her father standing there. His eyes were tired, his once straight posture now slumped in defeat. He had never looked older than he did in that moment. "Zephyra," he said softly, his voice laced with exhaustion, "the council has decided they want you sent away." Zephyra's heart skipped a beat. "Sent away?" she repeated, confused. "What do you mean?" The king lowered his gaze, avoiding her eyes. "They've sent word to Earth. A human, a scientist, will take you there. They believe there might be something on their planet that can help you." Zephyra stared at her father in disbelief. Earth, a human. She had heard rumors about the primitive humans, but to think they could have any solution for her, it felt like a cruel joke. "But why?" she whispered. "Why me? I'm a failure. I can't give the kingdom what it needs." Her father's voice cracked. "The kingdom is dying, Zephyra. Our line is ending. This is our last chance. The council has, well, they've lost faith in us, but they still think there might be hope if you go." Zephyra stood frozen, the weight of her father's words sinking in. Her world was crumbling around her, and she was being sent to a strange planet to find a solution she wasn't sure even existed. She wanted to argue, to tell her father it was hopeless, but she knew she had no choice. The council had spoken, and in this moment the fate of the kingdom was in their hands, not hers. The journey to Earth was long and uncomfortable. Zephyra sat alone in the darkened cabin of the ship, her thoughts swirling. She didn't know what to expect, but she knew one thing for sure. Nothing about this was going to be easy. When the ship finally landed on Earth, Zephyra was greeted by an unfamiliar landscape. The planet was covered in green forests and vast oceans, a far cry from the gleaming cities of Nor. She was taken to a small facility located deep in the wilderness, far from any human civilization. It was here that she would meet Dr. Ethan Carter, the human scientist who had been chosen to help her. Zephyra's arrival had caused a stir in the small research community. The humans, eager to meet the alien princess, had gathered in groups to stare at her, whispering among themselves. To them, she was an enigma, a being from a distant star system with powers and abilities they could never comprehend. Zephyra, however, felt nothing but coldness and fear. She didn't trust these humans, and she certainly didn't trust the man who was supposed to help her. Dr. Carter was waiting for her in a sterile, white room, his back turned as he looked over a series of data on a screen. When she entered, he turned quickly, his eyes scanning her with a mix of curiosity and caution. He was taller than she had expected, with dark hair and sharp features. He wore a simple lab coat, the kind that Zephyra had seen worn by scientists back in Nor. But this man was different. There was something in his eyes, something that made her uneasy. She couldn't quite put her finger on it, but she could tell he wasn't just another mindless human. "Princess Zephyra," Dr. Carter said, his voice smooth and professional. "It's an honor to meet you. I've been briefed on your situation. I'll do everything I can to help you." Zephyra didn't respond right away. She studied him, her expression hard and cold. She had no faith in this man. She didn't even want to be here. But her duty to her people, to her family, pushed her forward. "I don't believe you can help me," she said quietly, her voice filled with frustration. Dr. Carter looked unfazed by her words. "I understand your skepticism, but I have a different perspective. I've studied many species, but I've never encountered one quite like yours." If there's a way to fix this, I will find it. Zephyra didn't respond. She simply stared at him, trying to understand the true meaning behind his words. She had heard all the promises before, but she had never believed any of them. For days, Dr. Carter worked tirelessly, running tests and analyzing Zephyra's biological makeup. She allowed him to take samples, though she hated every moment of it. Each time she was poked or prodded, she felt more like an object, something to be studied, than a princess. Despite her anger, she couldn't help but notice something strange happening. The tests, though uncomfortable, seemed to be having an effect. Her energy levels increased. Her skin, once pale and sickly, now seemed to have a faint glow to it. Her body felt stronger, more alive. But she refused to admit it. She didn't want to get her hopes up. After all, this was still just a human doctor with his strange human methods. There was no way something like this could work. It wasn't until one late night, after a particularly draining round of tests, that Zephyra felt a strange sensation deep within her. It was subtle at first, like a spark igniting in her chest. But as the minutes passed, it grew stronger. She felt different. Something was changing inside her, something she couldn't explain. She stumbled to the mirror, her heart pounding in her chest. Her eyes widened as she saw it. Her body, once frail and failing, now looked healthier, stronger. It was as though the very essence of life had returned to her. Zephyra didn't know what to think. Was this the miracle the humans had promised? Could it really be happening? Dr. Carter entered the room just then, noticing her staring at her reflection. "Zephyra," he said cautiously, "are you feeling all right?" I feel different," she whispered, almost afraid to say the words aloud. He studied her carefully, his brow furrowing. "It's possible. This isn't something I've seen before, but it might be working." Zephyra turned away from the mirror, her mind racing. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, she felt a flicker of hope. Could it be possible that this human, this strange and unexpected source of help, might be the one to save her people? But as hope grew, so did her fear. What if it wasn't real? What if this miracle was just another false hope, one that would crumble the moment she allowed herself to believe in it? The answers, she knew, would come in time. But for now, all she could do was wait and see. And in that waiting, she wondered if the miracle could truly be as life-changing as it seemed. As the days passed, Zephyra's life on Earth began to settle into a strange routine. She woke up each morning in the small, white-walled room that had been prepared for her. The walls were bare except for a few simple pieces of furniture, and the sterile air of the research facility made her feel more like a prisoner than a guest. The humans around her were kind but distant, as though they weren't quite sure what to make of her. They had never encountered an alien before, and the way they looked at her made it clear that they still saw her as an enigma. Zephyra had heard whispers about her, some of it curious, some of it fearful. She understood their fascination, but it irritated her. She was not some object to be studied. Dr. Carter, however, was different. He didn't treat her like an alien. In fact, Zephyra found that he hardly treated her like a princess either. He saw her as a subject, yes, but also as a human being, something that made her feel both comforted and irritated at the same time. She couldn't decide if she liked him or not. His sharp features and calm, focused demeanor put her on edge. Yet she had to admit, she was grateful for the way he listened to her when she spoke, even when her words were bitter and full of doubt. Each day, they would go through a series of tests. Blood samples, scans, and tests that Zephyra found increasingly irritating. Yet she couldn't deny that something strange was happening inside her. Every time Dr. Carter took a sample or conducted an experiment, she felt stronger. Her energy was growing and her body seemed to be responding to whatever he was doing. But she didn't want to believe it. She couldn't let herself get excited. She had been disappointed too many times before. On the fourth day of their experiments, Dr. Carter approached her with a strange expression on his face. "Zephyra," he began, his voice thoughtful, "how are you feeling today?" Zephyra eyed him warily. "I've told you already," she said, though her voice wasn't as sharp as it used to be. "I'm fine, nothing has changed." He didn't seem convinced. "I know it's hard to notice, but something is different. I've been reviewing the scans from yesterday, and there's a noticeable improvement in your condition. Your body is responding better than I expected." Zephyra felt her heart skip a beat. She had been hoping that Dr. Carter was wrong, that she hadn't started to feel better. But the truth was undeniable. She could feel it in her muscles, in the way her skin had begun to regain its color. She hadn't allowed herself to acknowledge it, but now, hearing Dr. Carter say it out loud, she couldn't ignore it anymore. "Are you saying that?" I might be getting better? Zephyra asked, her voice softer than she intended. Dr. Carter gave her a small, reassuring smile. I think so, but we still need to run more tests to confirm. Zephyra didn't know how to respond. The thought of being cured, of finally being able to live a normal life, seemed so far-fetched. But for the first time since her arrival on Earth, she felt a spark of hope. Could it really be possible? After another round of tests, Dr. Carter suggested they take a break. You've been working hard. How about we step outside for a while? He proposed, a hint of amusement in his voice. I can show you the outside world. I'm sure it's much different from what you're used to. Zephyra was hesitant. She had been so focused on her mission that she hadn't bothered to explore Earth. And yet, something about the offer intrigued her. She hadn't seen much of the planet since her arrival, just the sterile confines of the lab. Maybe it was time to see something different. All right, she said, pushing herself to her feet. But don't think I'm doing this for you. I'm doing it for myself. Dr. Carter chuckled at her stubbornness but didn't comment. He led her out of the building into the fresh air, and Zephyra couldn't help but notice how green the world outside was. The trees stretched high into the sky, their leaves rustling softly in the wind. It was a peaceful, beautiful sight, and for a moment, Zephyra forgot about her troubles. The two of them walked for hours, exploring the surrounding forest. Zephyra was amazed by the diversity of life she saw, animals she had never imagined, plants that seemed to glow under the sunlight, and the strange, yet soothing sounds of the Earth's wildlife. As they sat by a small pond, Dr. Carter spoke quietly. You know, I've always wanted to travel the stars, to see what's out there, to learn about other worlds. Zephyra raised an eyebrow. And now you're stuck on Earth with an alien princess. Not exactly the adventure you envisioned, is it? He laughed. Not exactly, but it's still a kind of adventure, isn't it? Zephyra didn't answer right away. She was lost in thought, staring at the clear water of the pond. For a moment, she almost forgot she was on a foreign planet, that she was in exile, and that her people's future depended on her success. She felt free. For the first time since her arrival, she allowed herself to smile. It wasn't a grand smile, but it was genuine. Maybe it's not so bad after all, she said, her voice soft. Maybe Earth isn't as terrible as I thought. Dr. Carter smiled back at her. I'm glad you're starting to see it that way. The next few days were a blur. Zephyra continued with the treatments, but now she found herself actually looking forward to them. She was no longer just going through the motions. She was participating in something that might change her life. Dr. Carter was more than just a scientist to her now. He was someone who was working alongside her, not just for her. She could see the dedication in his eyes, and it made her question everything she had ever known. But even as the bond between them grew, Zephyra remained cautious. The progress was undeniable, but could it really be enough to save her people? Could a human truly help her, or was this all just a fluke? Dr. Carter seemed to think it was real. Every time he looked at her with that reassuring smile, Zephyra felt a little more confident. But deep down, she was still unsure. She had been let down too many times to trust something so easily. One evening, as they finished their tests for the day, Dr. Carter came to her with a new set of results. Zephyra, I think we've reached a breakthrough, he said, his voice filled with excitement. Zephyra's heart skipped. What do you mean? I think we've found the key, he replied, his eyes shining with hope. Your body is adapting to Earth's environment. The changes are incredible. Zephyra felt a rush of emotions. Could this really be it? Could she truly become the princess her people had once hoped for? As the days continued, Zephyra found herself more and more captivated by the progress. It was as though the miracle she had been waiting for had finally arrived. But with each day, she knew the stakes were higher. Her people needed her. And no matter how much she might want to believe in this miracle, she couldn't afford to get too attached. She had to focus on the task at hand. The kingdom was waiting. But for the first time, Zephyra allowed herself to dream of a future where she wasn't just the Barren princess, but a ruler, a symbol of hope for her people. And maybe, just maybe, Earth had given her the key to that future. The days seemed to blur into one another as Zephyra continued her treatment under Dr. Carter's watchful eye. She couldn't quite explain it, but something had shifted inside her. The feeling that she had once been broken, that she was nothing more than a lost cause, had started to fade. It wasn't gone completely, but the hope that had begun to form within her was undeniable. She still didn't fully trust the humans, still saw them as strangers in a strange world. But Dr. Carter's calm and steady presence had become a comfort. He never treated her as though she were an alien, just a person. And the more time they spent together, the more Zephyra found herself questioning everything she had once believed about her mission and about Earth. It wasn't just the treatments. It was the way Dr. Carter listened to her, how he paid attention when she spoke. He didn't interrupt or dismiss her words. He seemed genuinely interested in her thoughts, in the way she saw the world. And even though she would never admit it, Zephyra started to look forward to their conversations. He had a way of making her feel like she wasn't just some experiment, some hopeless case. She was a person. The first sign that things were changing came on the 6th day of their experiments. Zephyra felt something in her body she couldn't quite explain. It was as if a switch had been flipped. Her muscles, once weak and frail, now felt strong. Her skin, which had been pale and sickly, had taken on a healthy glow. It was subtle, but it was there, and Zephyra couldn't ignore it. That evening, Dr. Carter called her into his office with an urgent expression on his face. When she walked in, he was standing over a pile of papers, his eyes scanning the data with intensity. "Zephyra, I think we found something," he said, his voice tinged with excitement. Zephyra raised an eyebrow, skeptical but intrigued. "What do you mean?" "I've been going over the scans again," Dr. Carter began, his hands hovering over the papers as if the answers were right there, "and the changes in your body are more significant than I thought. The treatments are working more than I expected." Zephyra felt a surge of emotion. She had hoped for this, but hearing it from Dr. Carter made it real. The prospect of healing, of being able to carry the next generation of her people, was within reach. The idea was both thrilling and terrifying. "You're telling me I'm getting better?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Dr. Carter looked at her with a serious expression. "Yes, Zephyra, your body is responding. We're seeing cellular regeneration, something we haven't seen before. The fertility treatments, well, they're not just working, they're exceeding expectations." Zephyra stood still, processing his words. She had dreamed of this moment, but now that it was happening, she didn't know how to feel. Hope was a dangerous thing, especially when she had been disappointed so many times before. But now, it felt different. She was starting to believe that maybe, just maybe, there was hope for her after all. That night, as Zephyra lay in bed, her thoughts raced. For the first time since her arrival on Earth, she allowed herself to think beyond her mission. What would it mean if she could carry a child? What would it mean for her people? For the kingdom of Nor, would they accept her? Would they accept her as their ruler? Her mind wandered to thoughts of Dr. Carter. He had become more than just a scientist to her. He had become someone she could trust, someone who had helped her rediscover herself. She had no idea where this would lead, but for the first time she wasn't afraid to find out. The next few days were filled with tests, scans, and more data. Each day, Dr. Carter seemed more confident, his smile brighter. And with each passing day, Zephyra felt more and more like the person she had once been, the princess of Nor, capable of saving her people. She was no longer the broken, barren princess she had once been. She was someone who could change the future. One evening, after another round of tests, Dr. Carter suggested they take a walk outside again. "You've been working hard," he said. "Let's get some fresh air. I think it'll help." Zephyra agreed, though she was still feeling a little overwhelmed. The walk through the forest had become a ritual of sorts, a way for them to step away from the lab and talk about things beyond the treatment. It had become a time when they could talk, and for a moment, Zephyra could forget about the weight of her responsibilities. As they walked along the path, Zephyra couldn't help but notice how peaceful the world seemed. The soft rustling of the leaves, the distant sound of birds, and the cool breeze made her feel for just a moment as though everything was okay. She wasn't a princess. She wasn't a failure. She was just a person walking in the forest with someone who cared about her well-being. "What will you do when you're done here?" Zephyra asked, her voice quiet but curious. "When the tests are finished, when I'm healed," Dr. Carter hesitated, then looked at her. "I've thought about that. To be honest, I don't know. I'm not sure what my next step will be." Zephyra nodded, unsure of what to say. She understood. He had been dedicated to his work, but what came next for him? And what about her? Once she was healed, what would she do? Could she return to Nor as the hero who saved her people? Or would they see her as just another pawn in the royal game? "I don't think anyone ever really knows what comes next," Zephyra said after a long pause. "We all just take things one day at a time." Dr. Carter smiled, a small but genuine smile. "You're right about that." They walked in silence for a while, the weight of their thoughts hanging between them. Zephyra knew she had much to consider. Her future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, she wasn't afraid to face it. Maybe Earth was the place where her destiny would unfold. Maybe Dr. Carter was the key to unlocking her future. As they made their way back to the research facility, Zephyra felt something she hadn't felt in a long time. Hope. Hope for herself, for her people, and for the future that lay ahead. And while there were still many questions left unanswered, Zephyra knew that she had taken the first step toward something bigger than herself. A future where she wasn't just a Barren princess, but a symbol of strength, of survival, and of hope. Zephyra's transformation was now undeniable. She could feel the difference in her body every day, from the way her muscles had grown stronger to the renewed energy that surged through her with every step. The treatments Dr. Carter had given her were working in ways she hadn't thought possible. There was no question now, she was healing and the possibility of bearing an heir was no longer a distant dream. Yet, despite the progress, a deep anxiety gnawed at her. What would this mean for her future? What would happen when she returned to Noor? She had been exiled, abandoned by her people. Could they accept her now? Would they see her as the answer to their crisis, or would they simply use her to continue their legacy? Her thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the door opening. Doctor. Carter walked in with a clipboard in his hands, his expression serious. He had been so hopeful the past few weeks, and Zephyra had grown accustomed to his calm confidence. But today, there was something different in his demeanor. Zephyra, he began, his voice a little more tense than usual. We need to talk. She sat up straight in the chair, her heart beginning to race. What's wrong? Dr. Carter looked at her, his eyes filled with both concern and determination. It's not about the treatment. That's working better than we expected, but we've received some new information. The situation on Noor, it's more complicated than we thought. Zephyra frowned. What do you mean? The council's already decided to send me back, haven't they? He hesitated before answering. Yes, but it's not that simple. There are factions within the royal court that might not welcome you back. In fact, some of them might even see your return as a threat. Zephyra's stomach dropped. The possibility of returning to Noor had always seemed so distant to her. Now that it was within reach, she wasn't sure she was ready for it. She had always believed that her exile was a punishment, but it seemed now that it was something much more dangerous. Could she truly go back to a place that had once abandoned her? I don't care about their politics, she said, her voice cold. I just want to be useful to my people. If they want me back, they'll have to accept me for what I am. Dr. Carter took a deep breath, his eyes never leaving hers. It's not just about acceptance, Zephyra. The council isn't the only problem. There's a powerful group within the court that believes the throne should go to someone else. Someone they can control. They might use you, yes, but they'll also try to manipulate you. They won't want you to succeed. And if they don't get what they want, they'll stop at nothing to make sure you fail. Zephyra's heart pounded in her chest. She had always known that power and politics went hand in hand, but hearing it spoken aloud made her realize just how much danger she was in. She wasn't just fighting to prove herself, she was fighting for her very life. I didn't come all the way to Earth just to go back and be a puppet, Zephyra said firmly. If they want me to lead, I'll lead, but I'll do it on my own terms. I won't let anyone use me. Doctor. Carter nodded slowly, his expression thoughtful. That's exactly what I was hoping you'd say. But you're not going to be able to do this alone, Zephyra. You're going to need support allies. And if you're going to convince the council to accept you, you're going to have to prove yourself. You'll need to show them that you're not just some failed princess. They need to see you as a leader. Zephyra's gaze hardened. She knew that if she was going to make it, she had to play the game. She had always been told that she was nothing without the approval of her people. But maybe that was where she had gone wrong all along. Maybe, just maybe, she didn't need their approval at all. Then let's prove it, she said, her voice filled with determination. I've come too far to back down now. I won't let them control my future. Dr. Carter smiled, his earlier concern fading slightly. That's the spirit, but we need to make sure you're fully prepared. The journey back to Noor will take time, and there's still a lot to be done here. You're not just going to be fighting the council. You'll be fighting the court's manipulations, their lies. We need to make sure that when you go back, you're ready for whatever they throw at you. Zephyra nodded, feeling the weight of his words settle into her chest. She had always been strong, but this was something else. This was her chance to take control of her life, to fight not just for her future, but for her people's future. She wasn't going to let them down. The next few weeks were a blur of preparation. Dr. Carter worked tirelessly to finalize the last of her treatments, making sure she was physically ready for the challenges that lay ahead. But it wasn't just about her body anymore. Zephyra knew that if she was going to succeed, she had to be mentally and emotionally prepared as well. She began to study the politics of Nor, learning everything she could about the factions within the court and the personalities of the key players. It was clear that the game was far more complicated than she had anticipated. As the day of her departure grew closer, Zephyra found herself filled with a strange mixture of fear and excitement. She was leaving Earth, leaving the only place where she had felt some semblance of peace. Yet she knew that her true purpose lay beyond the stars, in a kingdom that had once rejected her. Doctor. Carter stood beside her as she prepared to leave the research facility, his eyes filled with a mixture of pride and sadness. "You're ready, Zephyra. I have no doubt you'll succeed." Zephyra turned to him, her eyes softening. "I couldn't have done this without you. Thank you." He smiled, though there was a hint of sadness in his eyes. "I'll be watching from here. Just remember, you're not alone. Even when it feels like the world is against you, there are always people who care." With that, Zephyra boarded the ship that would take her back to Nor. As the engines roared to life and the planet Earth slowly disappeared from view, Zephyra felt a strange sense of finality. She was leaving behind a world that had become her refuge, but she was heading toward her destiny. A destiny she had no intention of letting anyone control. The path ahead would be difficult, filled with obstacles and betrayals. But Zephyra had learned one important lesson during her time on Earth. She was stronger than she had ever known. And no matter what happened next, she would never let anyone take that from her. The journey back to Nor felt longer than Zephyra had anticipated. She had thought she would feel confident, maybe even excited, but instead she was filled with a strange sense of unease. The familiar stars and the vast emptiness of space surrounded her, but everything felt distant. She couldn't shake the feeling that something was waiting for her back on Nor, something she wasn't ready to face. As the ship entered Nor's atmosphere, the familiar sight of the palace city came into view. The massive structures that once seemed so impressive now looked cold and intimidating. Zephyra could feel her heart beat faster as they descended. She was no longer the weak, exiled princess who had been cast aside. She was a woman who had discovered strength within herself, but that strength felt fragile, and she wasn't sure if it would be enough to face what was waiting for her. The ship landed in the royal grounds, and Zephyra took a deep breath as she prepared to step onto the planet she had once called home. As the hatch opened and she stepped out, she was greeted by a small group of palace officials and guards. Their faces were impassive, their eyes scanning her with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion. Zephyra had expected this, but it didn't make the moment any easier. One of the palace officials stepped forward, his voice formal and cold. "Princess Zephyra, the council is waiting for you. They will decide your future from here." Zephyra nodded, her jaw set. "I didn't come here to be judged. I came to prove that I am capable of leading." The official's eyes flickered with surprise, but he didn't respond. He simply gestured for her to follow, and she walked past him, determined to face whatever awaited her. She could feel the weight of the palace walls closing in, and as they entered the council chamber, the familiar faces of the council members greeted her. Some looked surprised to see her standing before them, others looked skeptical. There were whispers among them, but no one spoke directly to her. At the far end of the room, the king and queen sat on their thrones, their faces unreadable. Zephyra's mother, the queen, looked tired, her once bright eyes dimmed by the years of worry. The king, though still strong, seemed less sure of himself than he had been before. Zephyra's heart sank as she took her place before them. It had been years since she had stood in this room, and the memories of her exile came rushing back. The cold stares, the whispers, the rejection. She had thought she would never have to face them again. But now she stood here, determined to prove that she was not the failure they had once believed her to be. The council members finally fell silent, and the king cleared his throat. "Zephyra," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. "You have returned. We never thought we would see this day." Zephyra didn't respond right away. She had rehearsed this moment in her mind 1,000 times, but now that it was here, the words didn't come easily. "I've returned to prove that I can lead," she said, her voice firm. "I've healed. I am no longer the Barren princess who was exiled. I am ready to take my place." There was a long pause, and Zephyra could see the council members exchanging uncertain glances. The silence was almost unbearable. Finally, one of the older council members, a man who had always been an outspoken critic of her, spoke up. "And why should we believe that you are capable of leading, Princess? What makes you think you are ready to rule when you failed to produce an heir?" Zephyra's heart tightened at the words, but she didn't flinch. She had heard this before. She had heard it from her people, from her family, from the council. But this time it didn't have the same power over her. She had something they didn't expect. She had strength. She had hope. "I didn't fail," she said, her voice gaining strength. "I am not just a vessel for an heir. I am a ruler capable of leading with wisdom, compassion, and strength. I have proven that I can survive, that I can thrive, and that I can make a difference. I am ready to lead this kingdom into a new era." The council members exchanged more glances, and the tension in the room was thick. Zephyra could feel the weight of their judgment pressing down on her, but she refused to back down. She had come too far. She had fought too hard. Finally, the queen spoke, her voice soft but clear. "Zephyra," she said, her eyes searching her daughter's face, "I have always believed in you, but this is not just about you anymore. This is about the future of our people. Can you lead us? Can you bring us the prosperity we once knew?" Zephyra took a deep breath. She had asked herself that same question countless times. Could she really do this? Could she truly lead Nor? The uncertainty was still there, but this time it didn't scare her. She had learned so much during her time on Earth. She had learned about resilience, about strength, and about the importance of believing in herself. "Yes," she said, her voice steady. "I can lead. I will lead." The room fell silent again, and for a long moment it seemed as though time itself had stopped. The council members sat back in their seats, unsure of how to respond. But the queen, her face full of emotion, slowly nodded. "If you truly believe that you can lead, then we will give you the chance," she said. "But know this, Zephyra, your path will not be easy. There are those within the court who will challenge you, who will try to undermine you. You must be ready to fight, not just for your throne, but for your people." Zephyra nodded, her heart swelling with a sense of purpose. She had known this would be difficult, but now she understood what was at stake. This wasn't just about proving herself. It was about saving her kingdom, her people, and her legacy. "I am ready," she said, her voice strong. "I won't back down. I will do whatever it takes to lead Nor to a better future." The queen looked at her for a long moment, then stood up and approached her. To Zephyra's surprise, her mother embraced her, a gesture that felt like a long-overdue reconciliation. "I am proud of you, Zephyra," the queen whispered, her voice filled with emotion. "You are more than I ever imagined. You are my daughter, and you are the future of Nor." Tears welled up in Zephyra's eyes, but she quickly blinked them away. She had a long road ahead of her, and there would be many battles to fight. But for the first time in her life, she felt ready. As she looked around the council chamber, she knew that her journey was just beginning. The road to leadership would be hard, but she would walk it with strength, conviction, and the knowledge that she was no longer a failure. She was a leader. And nothing would stop her from fulfilling her destiny.